In the early hours of the morning, my phone illuminated the dark room with a text message from my own son. It read, "Dad, plans have changed. You are not coming on the safari next week. Chloe wants only her family there." The very next day, I terminated the financial accounts, liquidated the multi-million-dollar property they lived in, and boarded a first-class flight out of the country. When they finally returned from their stolen luxury vacation, the historic home they thought they owned was gutted down to the brick. Before I delve into exactly how I systematically dismantled their perfect, arrogant lives, let me introduce myself. My name is Marcus Sterling. I am 68 years old. And for 4 decades, I ran a ruthless maritime logistics and shipping empire right here in Boston. It was a cold Thursday, just past 5 in the morning. The Boston sky outside my window was still that heavy, biting gray that settles over the harbor during the late winter months. I was sitting in my silent kitchen, nursing a dark roast coffee. The house had been painfully quiet for 3 years, ever since my wife, Clara, passed away. I was simply staring at the empty chair across the island, thinking about her warm smile. When my smartphone vibrated against the cold marble countertop, it was a text from Leo, my 32-year-old son, a man I had broken my back on the icy shipping docks to provide for. I picked up the device, expecting a simple question about our upcoming international trip, perhaps a question about our flight connections or the required travel visas. Instead, the words on the glowing screen hit me like a physical blow to the sternum. "Dad, plans have changed. You are not coming on the safari next week. Chloe wants only her family there." I just sat there in the dim light of the kitchen, reading the message over and over again, desperately trying to force the letters to mean something else. My chest tightened with a suffocating weight. Let me provide some necessary context so you fully understand exactly what I was looking at. This was not a cheap weekend getaway to a local ski resort. This was a 14-day, ultra-luxury private safari in the Serengeti of Tanzania. I had paid exactly $60,000 for it, putting the entire astronomical amount directly on my personal black card. I did not ask my son or his wife for a single penny. I paid for it because I wanted to profoundly honor Clara. Witnessing the Great Migration in Africa was the one major dream my wife had always talked about, but we never made the journey because I was always working, always expanding the fleet, always pouring every ounce of my physical energy into securing a massive financial empire for Leo. When Clara died, I promised myself I would take our son on that exact trip to celebrate her life. I booked the presidential tented suite at an exclusive, world-renowned reserve, a sprawling luxury accommodation with panoramic savanna views, private infinity pools, and personal butler service. I even prepaid for private hot air balloon tours over the plains. I booked it for all of us. Me, Leo, and his 30-year-old wife, Chloe. I wanted us to bond. I wanted to share that profound, deeply emotional memory with the only real family I had left in this world. And now, my son was sending me a cowardly text message before dawn, casually uninviting me from my own $60,000 gift, simply because his wife wanted her family there instead. A cold, heavy silence filled my kitchen. I set my coffee mug down. My hands were perfectly steady. When you spend 4 decades managing massive shipping logistics, dealing with corrupt port authorities and ruthless union bosses, you learn very quickly that blind anger is a completely useless emotion. You do not throw tantrums. You locate the breach in the hull, and you fix the problem. I tapped Leo's name on my screen and hit the call button. I held the phone to my ear, listening to the dialing tone. It rang twice. Then the line went completely dead. He rejected my call. My own son, the boy whose expensive private university tuition I had paid in full with cash, was too much of a coward to even hear my voice. Leo had always been pliable. He had gladly traded his mother's tough love upbringing for Chloe's manipulative, absolute control over his existence. I took a deep, stabilizing breath, steeling my nerves, and dialed the number a second time. This time, someone picked up the line, but it was not Leo. "Hello, Marcus." It was Chloe. Her voice was hushed, tightly controlled, and dripping with that fake, elegant politeness she always utilized when she was about to deliver something completely toxic. She did not call me Dad. She rarely did. I kept my voice perfectly level, completely hiding the freezing storm brewing inside my chest. Put my son on the phone. "Chloe." She let out a small, highly dramatic sigh, clearly annoyed that I was pushing the issue. "Leo is in the shower right now." "Marcus," she said smoothly. "And honestly, there is really nothing left to discuss. He sent you the text. The plans have changed." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the bleak frost on the window pane. "Chloe," I said slowly, choosing my words with absolute precision, "that is a $60,000 trip. I booked the presidential suite for us to honor Clara. You do not just change the plans and uninvite the person who paid for the entire ticket." I could hear her shifting on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of a television playing in the background, proving Leo was simply hiding from me. Then, she delivered the exact words that completely shattered whatever fragile illusion of family we still possessed. "Look, Marcus," she whispered, her tone hardening into something deeply condescending. "My mother has never been on a luxury vacation in her entire life. She really deserves this healing experience. Plus, my brother Julian is coming too. Let us be entirely honest here. Older men with your health history cannot handle the intense African heat. It is a massive medical liability. You would just be exhausted, slowing us down, and complaining the entire time. My family is in much better physical shape to actually enjoy the reserve." I closed my eyes. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of this woman was staggering. She was hijacking my generous gift, my hard-earned money, and my deeply personal tribute to my dead wife, weaponizing it to provide a private, all-expenses-paid, luxury vacation for her own mother and her deadbeat brother, people who had never contributed a single ounce of value to her life, let alone ours. I stayed utterly silent on the line, letting her deeply disrespectful words hang in the empty air. Chloe took my calculated silence as a complete victory. She genuinely thought she had won. She thought she was dealing with a tired, lonely, clueless old man who would just roll over and accept the massive disrespect because he was desperate for any scrap of family connection. "We will make sure to buy you some nice, authentic souvenirs from the local villages. Marcus," she added, her voice dripping with artificial pity. "Just stay home. Relax in the quiet. Enjoy the downtime. We will see you when we get back." Before I could utter a single syllable in response, she ended the call. The line went dead, leaving me entirely alone in the dark kitchen. I slowly pulled the phone away from my ear and set it down on the marble island. For a long minute, I simply stood there, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator. The sting of Chloe's voice still echoed loudly in my mind. You would just be exhausted, slowing us down, and complaining the entire time. In a different life, Maybe a different man would have screamed in blind rage. Maybe he would have violently thrown his coffee mug against the wall, called his son back repeatedly, and demanded a tearful, emotional explanation. But I did none of those things. When you spend running a massive maritime shipping business in Boston, you learn to process betrayal much differently. You do not survive 4 decades of dealing with cutthroat overseas competitors and brutal contract negotiations by throwing a helpless tantrum. In my line of work, when a massive steel bulkhead buckles under heavy pressure, you do not cry about it. You pull the structural blueprints. You inspect the integrity of the vessel, and you systematically locate the rot. Then, you cut it out with unforgiving precision. I calmly walked out of the kitchen, leaving my coffee untouched, and made my way down the hall to my private study. The floorboards creaked softly beneath my feet. A highly familiar sound in a house that felt suddenly entirely too empty and incredibly cold. I sat down at my heavy mahogany desk, flipped open my laptop, and waited patiently for the screen to cast its pale light across the quiet room. I needed to see the exact extent of the damage for myself. I opened my personal email and quickly found the original booking confirmation from the Elite Safari concierge. It was a massive digital receipt. $60,000 charged directly to my personal account without a second thought. I remembered the specific day I booked it. Sitting right here in this very chair, I had looked at a framed photograph of Clara on my desk. Her smiling face from our early days sailing the Cape, and I had felt a profound sense of purpose. I was buying us a beautiful, lasting memory. A grand sweeping tribute to the wonderful woman who had held our entire family together. I had carefully selected the presidential tent, the absolute crown jewel of the Serengeti, because I truly wanted Leo to experience the kind of extravagant luxury I had worked my entire life to secure. The Perdavid. I highlighted the long booking reference number, copied it to my clipboard, and navigated to the official luxury travel portal. My hands did not shake as I steadily pasted the code into the secure login field. I hit the enter key. The loading icon spun for a few agonizing seconds before the detailed itinerary page finally populated on the monitor. I stared blankly at the bright screen. I blinked, leaning much closer, my eyes rapidly scanning the detailed passenger manifest. I scrolled down to the primary guest details section, fully expecting to see my name. Marcus Sterling. Listed prominently first as the primary account holder and lead passenger, my name was completely gone. It was not moved down to a secondary cabin. It was not downgraded to a standard viewing tent. It was completely, surgically erased from the entire digital travel system, in the exact space where my name absolutely should have been. Boldly occupying the master bedroom of the massive presidential suite was the name Beatrice Vance. Right below her was Chloe Sterling. My chest grew tight, a painfully cold knot of realization rapidly forming deep in my stomach. But I deliberately forced myself to keep scrolling. There were 2 more passengers attached to the active reservation: Leo Sterling and Julian Vance. Julian, Chloe's 32-year-old brother, a profoundly lazy man who had completely dropped out of 3 different state colleges, who had been rightfully fired from 4 different entry-level logistics jobs I had personally secured for him as massive personal favors, and who currently lived rent-free in his mother's apartment, actively gambling online all day long. This fully grown adult man, who had never bothered to buy me so much as a cheap cup of coffee, was now officially registered to casually enjoy the private plunge pools, the personal butler service, and the premium evening dining packages that I had financed with my own blood, sweat, and decades of grueling physical labor. They had not merely uninvited me. That alone would have been intensely cruel. But this was something entirely different. They had actively logged into my private secure travel account, deliberately hijacked my paid reservation, and selfishly replaced me with Chloe's entire family. They had completely stolen my deeply personal gift to use as a highly private, all-expenses-paid luxury vacation for greedy, terrible people who meant absolutely nothing to me. I sat back deeply in my leather chair, fully letting the sheer horrifying magnitude of the betrayal completely wash over my tired bones. Chloe had intricately orchestrated this entire scheme. I knew her ruthless tactics perfectly well. She was an absolute master of silent, deeply toxic control, constantly framing her immensely selfish demands as acts of necessary familial care and profound emotional empathy. She had probably convinced Leo that I was simply too old, too fragile, or too painfully depressing to be around on a thrilling adventure trip. She had likely spun an elaborate, highly convincing narrative where taking her family was somehow a tremendous favor to me, gracefully sparing me the extreme physical exhaustion of extended travel across the globe. And Leo, my spineless, completely cowardly son, had eagerly let her do it. He had willingly allowed his deeply manipulative wife to actively log into the reservation portal, manually delete his deeply grieving father's name, and freely hand over a small fortune in luxury travel to his horrible, condescending in-laws. He had stood by totally silently while they completely, ruthlessly hijacked a highly sacred trip explicitly meant to deeply honor his own mother's lasting memory. The betrayal was so incredibly profound, so deeply calculated and viciously malicious, that it instantly and permanently stripped away absolutely any lingering paternal weakness I might have foolishly held on to. I looked intensely at the specific booking details once again. The massive international flight was officially scheduled to depart in exactly 7 days. Next Thursday. The official boarding passes were already actively generated and saved. The specialized luggage tags were physical printed. The incredibly expensive premium spa and beverage packages were already manually selected. I could clearly see on the screen that Julian had already happily gone in and successfully upgraded his personal beverage package to the absolute ultimate tier, happily granting him unlimited daily access to incredibly expensive top-shelf vintage wines. All of these excessive, deeply arrogant charges were linked directly and continuously to my personal black card, which was incredibly still dutifully stored deeply in the concierge system as the primary default payment method for absolutely all ongoing resort expenses. They actually thought they had finally won. They truly, deeply believed they had successfully and completely outmaneuvered me. Chloe had smugly sized me up and quickly, foolishly decided I was just a highly tired, deeply broken old man who would quietly and obediently absorb the massive, horrible disrespect, who would obediently stay home and sadly accept her profoundly fake pity simply because I was far too desperate for my son's eventual meager affection to ever cause a major messy scene. She arrogantly thought my heavy silence on the phone earlier was the pathetic, completely submissive silence of a totally, utterly defeated man. She did not actively understand exactly who she was foolishly dealing with. She did not logically understand that a seasoned man who spent 40 incredibly grueling years successfully dominating the highly brutal, entirely unforgiving world of commercial maritime shipping absolutely does not simply quietly surrender his hard-earned personal assets. I absolutely did not build massive, expensive shipping fleets by carelessly letting greedy, terrible people steal my incredibly expensive cargo. I positively did not successfully amass my large personal wealth by foolishly allowing lazy, Deeply entitled parasites to quietly and constantly drain my private bank accounts without extremely serious, highly devastating consequences. I stared intensely at the glowing screen, quietly tracing the arrogant names of the Vance family with my digital cursor. An incredibly slow, deeply chilling clarity, smoothly and completely settled entirely over my busy mind. The profound sadness was entirely gone now. Completely. Instantly evaporated into the cold morning air. In its absolute place was a highly sharp, intensely focused, heavily tactical, purely destructive energy. I deliberately reached for the yellow legal notepad I constantly kept perfectly centered firmly on my wooden desk. Quietly clicking my heavy metal pen, I actively started writing down a highly detailed, extremely precise list. I absolutely did not quickly cancel the extremely expensive safari tickets right then. That exact move would have been entirely too simple. Far too incredibly easy. That specific choice would have only been a mere, highly temporary inconvenience for them to eventually fix. I desperately, completely wanted them to happily pack their highly expensive designer bags. I fully wanted them to happily drive together to the busy, crowded international airport. I positively wanted them to successfully board that massive flight, feel the warm African breeze upon landing, and fully deeply experience the highly arrogant thrill of their totally stolen victory. I intensely wanted them safely, completely trapped on that massive isolated reserve. I confidently closed the silver laptop with a highly quiet, beautifully definitive, extremely satisfying snap. The fragile foundation of our entire family had not just slightly cracked under pressure, it was entirely rotten to the very core, and it was exactly time to absolutely bring the whole heavy structure down. My smartphone vibrated against the hard wooden surface of the desk. Breaking the heavy silence of the early morning, I looked down at the bright screen. The caller identification displayed Leo's name in bold black letters. It had been exactly 25 minutes since Chloe had abruptly hung up on me. 25 minutes of absolute silence, while my son presumably gathered the tiny fraction of courage required to finally face his own father. I let the phone vibrate 3 separate times. I wanted him to sweat. I wanted him to sit in the uncomfortable tension of his own cowardly actions before I granted him an audience. On the 4th long ring, I reached out and slowly swiped the green icon to accept the call. I brought the device to my ear and simply breathed, waiting for him to speak first. I did not offer a warm greeting. I just let the empty dead air press heavily against his guilty conscience. "Dad, are you there?" Leo's voice came through the small speaker. It was noticeably shaky, thin, and stretched incredibly tight with nervous anxiety. "Yes, Leo, I am here," I replied. My voice was completely flat, entirely devoid of any warm parental affection. It was the exact same tone of voice I used to use when dealing with a highly dishonest logistics supplier who thought he could safely cut corners on a massive commercial shipping route. I heard my son swallow hard over the line. "Listen, Dad," he started, immediately stammering over his own carefully rehearsed words. "I am really sorry about how all of this is suddenly coming out. Chloe did not mean to sound harsh on the phone earlier. It is just that we are dealing with a highly sensitive, very complicated medical situation right now." I remained completely silent, forcing him to desperately fill the uncomfortable void. Chloe has been struggling with severe psychological burnout and extreme anxiety for the last few months, Leo continued, his voice dropping into a hushed, dramatically serious whisper. Her licensed spiritual healer and therapist strongly suggested that she desperately needs a completely stress-free, entirely supportive emotional environment to properly heal. The medical professional specifically recommended that she spend some quality, uninterrupted healing time with just her immediate family. Her mother and her brother know exactly how to manage her delicate emotional triggers. I listened to this pathetic, meticulously constructed lie, absolutely pouring out of my 32-year-old son's mouth. The sheer level of sophisticated manipulation was genuinely staggering. They were actively weaponizing the concept of mental health to casually justify stealing a $60,000 luxury vacation. I knew perfectly well that Chloe was not suffering from severe clinical anxiety. Just 3 days ago, I had personally seen her wildly celebrating with a large group of her loud friends at an incredibly expensive downtown Boston restaurant, drinking premium cocktails and laughing until she could barely stand up. This entire therapy narrative was an incredibly convenient, perfectly timed excuse uniquely designed to paint me as the villain if I dared to object to their outright theft. It is just for her mental health. Dad, Leo pleaded, sounding increasingly desperate for my blind validation. You know how important family support is during a major psychological crisis. We did not want to burden you with her heavy emotional baggage on what is supposed to be a fun, relaxing trip. You would just be stressed out trying to accommodate her strict dietary needs and her therapy schedules. It is honestly much better for everyone if you just stay home and relax in peace. We fully intend to pay you back for your specific ticket eventually. Once our personal finances stabilize a bit, we will set up a monthly payment plan to slowly reimburse you for the money. Please, Dad, just try to understand our incredibly difficult position. Please do not ruin this important healing journey for us by getting unnecessarily angry. I closed my eyes, feeling a profound, heavy wave of utter disappointment completely wash over me. I thought about my late wife Clara. She had been a fiercely strong, incredibly resilient woman who absolutely believed in the strict, unforgiving concept of personal accountability. When Leo was a teenager, if he ever tried to avoid taking direct responsibility for his own foolish mistakes, Clara would confidently march him straight back to the scene of the problem and force him to look the offended party dead in the eyes while he delivered a genuine apology. She raised him with tough love, trying to mold his soft clay into a solid, dependable man. But the devastating truth was that Leo had always been inherently weak. He had absolutely zero structural integrity. The very moment he left our strict household and met Chloe, he had eagerly and completely surrendered his own spine. He actively traded his strong, demanding mother for a deeply controlling, heavily manipulative wife who expertly dictated his every single move. I knew with absolute terrifying certainty that Leo was currently standing in a quiet corner of his massive house, reading directly from a specialized mental script that Chloe had drilled into his head just minutes before. He was nothing but a frightened puppet, dutifully reciting his master's lines. He actually believed that dangling the vague, entirely empty promise of a future payment plan would magically pacify my mounting rage. He genuinely thought that mentioning a fictional long-term reimbursement schedule for a massive $60,000 credit card charge would successfully blind me to the immediate reality of their vicious betrayal. I knew perfectly well that I would never see a single dime of that money from them. They lived entirely beyond their actual means, constantly drowning in superficial debt just to maintain a highly curated, profoundly fake image of extreme wealth on their various social media profiles. The idea that they would suddenly develop the sharp financial discipline required to slowly pay back tens of thousands of dollars was an absolute laughable fantasy, but I did not point out the glaring logical flaws in his pathetic story. I did not loudly demand to see this supposed therapist's official medical notes. I did not scream about the blatant, horrific disrespect of replacing my name with Julian's name on a trip designed to honor my dead wife. Instead, I smoothly leaned into the carefully constructed lie. I deliberately forced every single trace of anger, betrayal, and sorrow completely out of my voice. I took a slow, deep breath, perfectly mimicking the gentle, deeply understanding tone of a highly sympathetic, thoroughly defeated old father who simply wanted his son to be happy. "All right, son," I said softly. My voice was smooth, quiet, and completely non-threatening. If Chloe is truly struggling with such a severe, complicated medical issue, then of course she needs to be surrounded by her own mother and brother. Mental health is incredibly important. I completely understand why you had to change the passenger details so abruptly. You do not need to worry about me. I will be perfectly fine staying here at the house. Just focus entirely on taking good care of your wife and making sure she gets the peaceful, healing environment she desperately needs. There was a sharp, sudden intake of breath over the phone line. I could literally hear the massive, incredibly heavy weight of profound anxiety, completely lifting right off Leo's shoulders. The absolute relief in his voice was palpable, almost sickeningly sweet. "Really, Dad?" he asked, his tone instantly shifting from desperate panic to bubbling, highly arrogant excitement. "You are not incredibly mad at us, I mean. I know it is a huge sudden change of plans, and I was so deeply worried you would completely blow up at me over the financial aspects of the tickets. I am not mad at all, Leo." I lied effortlessly. My face was a cold, expressionless mask of pure stone. A father's only job is to properly support his son during difficult times. You go on your trip. Enjoy the fresh savannah air. Have a wonderful, relaxing time with the Vance family. We can easily discuss all the boring financial details and the specific reimbursement plans whenever you get back to Boston. There is absolutely no rush. Thank you, Dad. Leo gushed, completely falling into the massive invisible trap I had just perfectly laid out for him. You are the absolute best. Seriously. This means the entire world to Chloe and me. We will definitely bring you back something incredibly nice from the local artisans. I have to go help Chloe finish packing the last of her specialized therapy items, but I will text you right before we board the flight next week. I love you. Dad, I love you too. Son? I replied calmly. Have a very safe and highly memorable journey. I pulled the phone away from my ear and deliberately ended the call. The screen went completely dark, reflecting my own hard, unsmiling face in the black glass. Leo had eagerly bought the entire performance. He genuinely, truly believed that his clueless, overly generous old father had completely swallowed their pathetic fairy tale without a single moment of critical hesitation. He was likely walking back into his master bedroom right now, proudly flashing a victorious smile at his heavily manipulative wife, confidently assuring her that the stupid old man was successfully handled and safely out of their way. They thought they had securely won the absolute ultimate prize. They confidently believed they were about to embark on the most incredibly luxurious, entirely free vacation of their entire superficial lives. But they were completely, catastrophically wrong. The real war had not even officially begun yet. And my deeply arrogant son had absolutely no idea that he had just casually handed me the exact tactical ammunition I desperately needed to thoroughly systematically destroy his perfectly curated, profoundly fake life. I sat in the absolute silence of my study, slowly steepling my fingers together, entirely ready to initiate the next devastating phase of my response. The heavy mahogany clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking the slow passage of time. Suddenly, the quiet atmosphere was shattered by a sharp, vibrating buzz from the smartphone resting on my desk. The screen illuminated the dim room with a harsh white light. I leaned forward and picked up the device, fully expecting another text message from Leo. Perhaps a hollow apology, or another carefully crafted lie to ensure I was completely pacified. Instead, the notification banner displayed the bright blue logo of my primary financial institution. It was an automated security alert, my brow furrowed in mild confusion. I swiped the screen to unlock the phone and opened the secure banking application. The alert was directly tied to a specific checking account, one that I rarely monitored because it was explicitly meant to remain completely dormant. It was a joint emergency checking account that I officially shared with Leo. This account was a deeply sentimental relic from a completely different era of our lives. Many years ago, when Leo first moved out of our family house to attend university, my late wife Clara had firmly insisted that we establish a shared financial safety net for him. Clara was an incredibly loving mother, but she was also exceptionally practical and fiercely protective. She wanted to ensure that if our only son ever found himself in a genuine crisis, a sudden medical emergency, a major vehicle breakdown, or a catastrophic living situation, he would have immediate TAS, unquestioned access to liquid funds without having to wait for banking hours or cross-country wire transfers. I had initially argued against the idea, firmly believing that a young man needed to learn how to actively manage his own financial hardships to build real character. But Clara had looked at me with those piercing, uncompromising eyes and quietly demanded that we provide him with a silent, permanent pillar of financial security. I dutifully deposited a very generous sum of cash into that specific account and effectively forgot about it. Over the passing decades, even after Leo successfully graduated, found a lucrative corporate career, and eventually married Chloe, I never bothered to officially close the account or remove his name from the authorized user list. I simply kept a substantial cushion of liquid cash resting in the vault, quietly honoring my sacred promise to Clara to always provide a safe harbor for our child. For years, the balance had remained entirely untouched. Leo clearly knew the strict rules of the arrangement. The money was exclusively reserved for absolute life-altering emergencies. I slowly tapped the push notification, prompting the mobile banking application to instantly load the detailed transaction history for the joint emergency account. The digital screen refreshed, and my eyes locked onto the bold black numbers proudly displayed at the very top of the ledger. My heart skipped a remarkably heavy beat. The total available balance had been drastically and completely reduced. I frantically scrolled down to the recent activity section, my vision rapidly narrowing on the most recent line items. There, glowing with stark digital clarity, were 3 back-to-back cash withdrawals. Each individual withdrawal was for the exact same incredibly specific numerical amount, $9,999. I stared intensely at the bright screen, letting the cold mathematical reality completely wash over my racing mind. 3 consecutive transactions of $9,999, flawlessly executed within mere minutes of each other, efficiently pulling a massive total of $29,997 of raw, untraceable cash directly out of my private emergency reserves. The warm blood in my veins instantly turned to absolute ice. As a hardened man who spent 40 grueling years actively managing highly complex commercial shipping budgets, aggressively dealing with massive union payrolls, and skillfully navigating strict corporate banking regulations, I knew exactly what that highly specific number meant. You absolutely do not withdraw exactly $9,000 in one. $999 from a bank by mere coincidence. In the United States financial system, Any single cash transaction of $10,000 or more automatically triggers a mandatory currency transaction report directly to the federal government. It is a strictly enforced legal requirement specifically designed to aggressively monitor and routinely prevent illicit financial activities and criminal money laundering by deliberately and carefully keeping each individual cash withdrawal just exactly one single dollar under that major legal reporting threshold. Whoever physically took the money was actively engaging in a highly calculated, deeply illegal financial maneuver, commonly known as structuring. They were intentionally, maliciously bypassing sophisticated federal monitoring systems. They desperately wanted to pull a massive, life-changing amount of liquid cash completely out of the banking system without ever generating any official corporate banking flags or prompting any automated security phone calls to the primary account holder. They were not simply stealing my expensive luxury vacation to Africa. They were actively, systematically draining my liquid financial assets while simultaneously feeding me a pathetic, entirely fictional, emotional sob story about Chloe, supposedly suffering from severe clinical anxiety. The profound sheer audacity of their multi-layered criminal deception was physically sickening. Leo had literally just spent 10 long minutes on the telephone, practically begging for my deepest paternal sympathy, emotionally describing his wife as a fragile, deeply troubled woman who desperately needed a peaceful wellness retreat to simply function in society. All the while, they had already brilliantly orchestrated a highly illegal, heavily calculated extraction of nearly $30,000 in completely untraceable cash. I placed the phone down on the wooden desk, my breathing perfectly even, but my mind operating at a terrifying hypervigilant speed. Why would a married couple living in a beautiful, extremely expensive Beacon Hill historic brownstone ever desperately need $30,000 in raw physical cash? You absolutely do not use unrecorded stacks of $100 bills to pay for normal, legitimate household expenses like utility bills, premium groceries, or luxury car insurance. You do not need carefully structured physical currency to comfortably enjoy a paid luxury safari vacation, where absolutely every single premium amenity is neatly linked to a digital concierge account. Untraceable cash is exclusively gathered and utilized for only one specific purpose. It is purposely used to secretly pay for highly illicit goods or incredibly shady, under-the-table services that cannot ever legally leave a permanent paper trail. My son was not just a weak, pathetic coward who had allowed his terrible wife to casually disrespect his grieving father. He was now an active, incredibly brazen participant in a major financial conspiracy aimed directly at my personal wealth. The intricate pieces of the dark puzzle were finally clicking together with devastating clarity. The sudden cancellation of my safari ticket, the inclusion of Chloe's highly questionable family, the deeply manipulative, thoroughly rehearsed phone call, and now the massive, highly illegal structuring of cash withdrawals from an account they genuinely thought I was entirely too old and completely too oblivious to actively monitor. They had truly crossed the point of no return. I absolutely had to uncover exactly why. I closed the banking application on my phone and pushed my leather chair back from the mahogany desk. The quiet morning air in my study felt suddenly heavy, thick with the undeniable reality of my son's deceit. $30,000 in structured cash withdrawals was not a simple misunderstanding. It was a massive, deliberate maneuver to bypass federal banking security executed by someone who desperately needed untraceable funds. I needed to see Leo face to face. I needed to look him directly in the eyes and see the truth for myself. I stood up, grabbed my heavy wool coat from the hallway closet, and walked out the front door into the crisp, gray Boston morning. I climbed into my luxury sedan and started the engine. The drive from my quiet suburban neighborhood into the historic heart of the city usually took about 40 minutes, But today the journey felt like an eternity. The rhythmic thumping of the tires over the cold pavement matched the furious beating of my heart as I navigated the winding, tree-lined streets of Beacon Hill. The modern condominiums gradually gave way to sprawling, multi-million-dollar historic brownstones. The neighborhood was an exclusive enclave of manicured brick sidewalks, wrought iron fences, and towering gas lamps. It was a place designed for profound comfort and absolute security. I turned the steering wheel and slowly approached the specific cobblestone street where Leo and Chloe lived. I did not pull directly into their expansive carriage house driveway. My gut instinct, honed by decades of dealing with highly deceitful logistics, contractors, and hostile business negotiations, warned me to remain completely unseen. I drove past their property, parked my sedan discreetly, 2 full blocks away, and turned off the ignition. I sat in the silent cabin for a moment, simply staring at my calloused hands resting on the steering wheel. I stepped out of the vehicle and began the short walk down the pristine sidewalk. The cold morning air bit at my face, but I barely felt it. My mind was entirely focused on the massive structure standing at the end of the block. It was a stunning, historic architectural masterpiece valued at $3.5 million. I knew the exact appraisal value because I was the one who had purchased the property. When Leo and Chloe were first married, they had endlessly complained about the soaring cost of living and their inability to afford a decent home in a safe, elite neighborhood. I wanted to give my only son the ultimate head start in life, a solid foundation that I had to fight tooth and nail to build for myself. I had bought the Beacon Hill brownstone entirely in cash. I did not want them burdened by a suffocating 30-year mortgage or crippled by fluctuating interest rates. However, my veteran business sense had prevailed over pure parental emotion. I legally placed the entire property into a strict revocable living trust. I retained ultimate control of the deed, but I allowed them to live there completely rent-free. I even paid the exorbitant annual property taxes and the hefty Historical Preservation Association fees out of my own pocket. I provided them with a flawless, luxurious existence, totally free of any housing expenses. All they had to do was maintain the property and build their lives, and now they were using the absolute financial freedom I provided to systematically steal from me. As I approached the edge of their manicured property line, I stayed close to the tall brick privacy walls, deliberately avoiding the sweeping line of sight of their front door smart camera. The sheer audacity of their deception tasted like bitter ash in my mouth. I slipped quietly through the side gate, my expensive leather shoes making virtually no sound on the damp paving stones. I bypassed the grand front entrance and made my way to the discreet side door that led directly into the spacious, renovated carriage house they used as a garage. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my heavy brass keyring. I smoothly selected the silver master key, a spare I had explicitly kept for major maintenance emergencies. I slid the key into the deadbolt. With a slow, highly practiced motion, I turned the lock. The well-oiled mechanism clicked open with barely a whisper. I gently pushed the heavy fireproof door open and stepped inside the cavernous carriage house. I stood in the center of the cold concrete floor for a few long seconds, allowing my eyes to fully adjust to the dim artificial light. The sprawling space was a pristine, meticulously organized monument to their deeply unearned, highly excessive lifestyle. Chloe's pristine white luxury SUV and Leo's expensive imported sports car sat gleaming under the overhead lights. Both vehicles had been purchased with funds I had generously provided under the guise of early inheritance gifts. I remembered writing the massive checks for those luxury vehicles, falsely believing I was genuinely helping them securely establish a completely stable life. Now those cars looked like pure trophies of theft, The air inside smelled faintly of expensive leather interior polish and premium motor oil. I closed the side door behind me, ensuring the latch caught silently. The historic house above me was not empty. Even through the thick, insulated ceiling of the garage, I could clearly hear the distinct muffled sounds of active movement, footsteps pacing rapidly across the original hardwood floors. The sharp, heavy thud of large objects being dropped. And voices. I heard their voices echoing faintly through the antique ventilation ducts. I moved slowly toward the interior utility stairs. A narrow secondary staircase, originally designed for servants, that led directly up to the back hallway near the sprawling master suite. I placed my hand on the wooden railing and began to climb. I placed my shoes carefully on the very edge of each wooden step, expertly shifting my body weight to avoid making a single creak. I ascended into the residential level of the house, blending perfectly into the dark shadows of the narrow rear corridor. The sounds from the master bedroom became incredibly clear. They were not packing in a frantic, depressive panic for a wellness retreat. They were openly celebrating. I heard Chloe let out a sharp, genuine burst of laughter, a joyful sound that directly contradicted the elaborate story of her severe clinical anxiety. I stood perfectly still in the protective darkness of the hallway, my back pressed firmly against the cool plastered wall. Through the partially open door of the master suite, I could see the bright morning light spilling across the imported Persian rugs. I could hear the distinct rhythmic zipping of heavily overstuffed luggage. They were dragging massive, hard-shell designer suitcases across the floor, casually discussing which expensive formal outfits to bring for the exclusive safari dinners. My chest burned with a profound "Itzefore." There was absolutely no medical emergency. There was no desperate need for a quiet, healing family retreat. They were simply packing for a highly extravagant, incredibly expensive luxury vacation that they had ruthlessly stolen directly from my grieving hands. I held my breath, narrowing my focus, and silently listened as the true, horrifying depths of their sinister betrayal finally began to unfold right in front of me. I stood perfectly still in the protective darkness of the hallway. The master bedroom door was cracked open just enough to let a sliver of bright sunlight slice across the expensive hardwood floor. I could hear the distinct sound of a heavy suitcase zipper being aggressively pulled shut. Then came the voice of Chloe. It was not the hushed, concerned whisper she had used on the phone with me just hours prior. It was loud, bright, and completely saturated with an ugly, arrogant triumph. She was actively mocking me. I could hear the sneer in her words as she imitated my calm acceptance of her demands. She laughed sharply, telling someone in the room how incredibly easy it had been to get the stupid old man to surrender a luxury vacation. She bragged about how she barely had to push before I rolled over and gave her exactly what she wanted. My jaw tightened. She was proudly describing my profound grief as a massive flaw to be mercilessly exploited for her own personal gain. Another voice joined the conversation, drawing a harsh, greedy laugh from Chloe. It was Julian, the perpetually unemployed brother of Chloe, the man whose entire existence seemed strictly dedicated to avoiding any form of honest labor. He was lounging somewhere in the room, likely sitting on the very bed my money had purchased. He eagerly asked if they had the international boarding passes fully printed. Then he loudly proclaimed that his primary goal for the entire 14-day African journey was to systematically drain the reserve of its most expensive vintage wine. He cheerfully reminded Chloe to double-check that the concierge spending account was still solidly connected to my black card. He vividly described the premium champagne and the highly exclusive culinary packages he planned to order every single night, joking that he would drink enough to put me in a shallow financial grave. He actually used those exact words. He was actively salivating over the prospect of bleeding my personal finances dry while staying at a luxury resort I had booked to honor the sacred memory of my deceased wife. The profound disrespect echoing through that room was a physical weight pressing down on my chest. As I listened to Julian joyfully anticipating his stolen luxury, my mind involuntarily drifted back through the long, grueling decades of my life. I thought about the bitter freezing rain of the early Boston mornings in the late 1970s. I remembered waking up at 4 a.m, my entire body violently aching from the previous day of labor on the shipping docks. I remembered tying my worn leather work boots in the dark, quietly slipping out of the house so I would not wake a sleeping Clara or a young, innocent Leo. I spent 40 long years standing in freezing harbor winds, aggressively managing heavy cargo logistics and negotiating brutal shipping routes until the physical cartilage in my lower spine was practically ground into dust. I permanently ruined my own back, sacrificing my own physical health for one single unwavering purpose. I wanted to ensure that my only son would absolutely never have to struggle the way I did. I wanted to build a massive, impenetrable financial fortress so Leo could securely live a beautiful life, completely free from the crushing anxiety of poverty. Clara and I had sacrificed every single personal luxury so that boy could have the world, and there he was, my son, the ultimate product of all that grueling sacrifice. He was standing in that bedroom completely silent, while his deeply manipulative wife and her parasitic brother openly mocked the man who had given him absolutely everything. He was a coward, a weak, spineless shadow of a man who lacked the fundamental moral courage to defend his own father. But the truly devastating part, the moment that actively shifted this entire situation from a case of profound greed to something incredibly dark and deeply sinister, was about to happen. The loud sound of the luggage zipper stopped. The room fell relatively quiet for a few brief seconds. Then Leo finally spoke. His voice was completely devoid of any joy. It was tight, nervous, and heavily laced with a profound, cowardly hesitation. He did not ask them to stop making fun of me. Instead, he asked a question that made the blood freeze entirely solid within my veins. "Are you completely sure about the legal papers?" Chloe, Leo asked. His tone was a pathetic, fearful whisper, but it carried perfectly into the dark hallway where I stood. I could clearly hear the nervous shuffling of his feet against the floorboards. I mean, doing this while we are out in the African bush, miles away from everything. It feels like a massive risk. We are talking about fundamentally altering his entire life. He is not actually losing his memory. Chloe, we both know that he just misses Mom. He is just sad. The absolute gravity of those specific words hit me like a runaway freight train. Legal papers. Losing his memory. My breathing completely stopped. I stood frozen in the cold shadows, my hands slowly clenching into tight, rigid fists at my sides. Leo knew I was perfectly fine. He actively acknowledged that my mind was sharp and that my only real affliction was the profound grief of losing his mother. Yet he was questioning a legal strategy based on a completely fabricated medical premise. Chloe did not offer him any comfort or any moral reassurance. She instantly snapped at him with a tone so incredibly vicious and sharply commanding that it made me physically recoil. She demanded to know if he was foolish enough to simply wait around until I inevitably decided to change my estate planning. She aggressively reminded him that I held the absolute legal power to alter the terms of the family trust at any given moment. She coldly asked him if he wanted to risk watching me leave the entire family fortune to a random maritime charitable foundation out of spite. Then, she loudly stated that her mother's own personal medical doctor had already officially signed the preliminary evaluation documents. She proudly declared that this highly corrupt, heavily compensated medical professional had explicitly put in writing that I was currently exhibiting severe, undeniable signs of rapidly progressing Lewy body dementia. The sheer horrifying magnitude of their coordinated conspiracy crushed the last fragments of my paternal denial. The 3 recent bank withdrawals of $9,999 were not just for luxury shopping or paying off random consumer credit card debt. That cash was actively used to illegally bribe a medical doctor and quietly secure falsified psychiatric evaluations. They were not merely stealing a vacation. They were constructing a sophisticated illegal medical trap to completely strip away my human rights, seize my financial assets, and forcibly lock me away in a facility against my will. I stood completely frozen in the dark corridor, my heart hammering a slow whine, heavy rhythm of absolute unforgiving war. As I finally realized with total terrifying clarity that my own flesh and blood had just officially signed the irreversible legal paperwork for his own permanent and total financial destruction, the suffocating silence in the hallway was suddenly broken by Chloe's venomous voice. She did not coddle my son's sudden burst of moral conscience. She actively attacked it. "Do you honestly want to wait around until your senile father casually decides to change his mind?" she hissed, her tone slicing the quiet air like a cold razor. "Do you want to patiently sit here until he rewrites his entire will and leaves every cent of his estate to some random charity out of pure spite? We have already paid for the legal groundwork. Leo, my mother's personal neurologist has already officially signed the preliminary medical affidavit. The paperwork clearly states that Marcus is actively showing severe, undeniable signs of advanced Lewy body dementia." I stopped breathing. The antique floorboards beneath my shoes felt as though they were giving way. Lewy body dementia. The sheer, terrifying weight of that specific phrase hung heavily in the air of the house I had purchased with my own blood and sweat. It was the most insidious, deeply cruel lie a person could possibly fabricate. My mind was incredibly sharp. I still actively managed my own complex investment portfolios and vividly remembered the exact day I signed the manifest for my first commercial shipping vessel. Yet, my own daughter-in-law was casually discussing a falsified medical diagnosis, as if she were simply planning a weekend grocery shopping trip. Suddenly, a blinding flash of realization hit me. The banking alerts from earlier this morning. The 3 consecutive cash withdrawals of exactly $9,999 from our joint emergency checking account. I had initially suspected they were simply using the structured, untraceable cash to secretly purchase luxury goods or pay off hidden consumer debts. But the dark truth was exponentially worse. That heavily structured $30,000 in raw cash was specifically used to illegally bribe a deeply corrupt medical professional 7Ds. They had brazenly used my own financial assets to quietly purchase a completely fraudulent psychiatric evaluation from a doctor embedded in the Vance family network. The remaining cash was undoubtedly handed under the table to whatever completely unethical notary and attorney they had hired to secretly draft the sinister legal documents without raising official red flags. They were successfully financing my own legal and medical execution, using the very money I had painstakingly saved to protect my son from genuine hardship. His voice vibrating with a pathetic, deeply sickening cowardice. But what if the probate judge wants to actively question him? Chloe, what if the court officially demands a secondary medical opinion from a totally independent specialist? He is going to fight back. You know my dad. He never simply surrenders when he is backed into a corner. Chloe let out a highly arrogant scoff that echoed chillingly down the narrow staircase. He is not going to have the chance to fight back. Leo, she replied smoothly, her voice dripping with dark, malicious confidence. That is exactly why we are leaving on this safari tomorrow morning. while we are safely isolated in the middle of the African savannah, completely unreachable, and totally removed from the situation. Our attorney is going to officially file the petition for emergency medical proxy and conservatorship with the county court. The judge will clearly see the signed medical affidavit from a licensed physician. I leaned my heavy shoulders against the cool plaster wall, closing my eyes and listening intensely as she carefully outlined the final, incredibly devastating phase of her highly illegal and totally unforgivable master plan. And when the court predictably asks for a pattern of recent erratic behavior, Chloe continued, her tone practically vibrating with smug, victorious pride. We will simply present them with the undeniable fact that he deliberately abandoned his own highly expensive family vacation at the very last possible minute. We will convincingly argue that his mental state has rapidly deteriorated to the point where he is a severe danger to himself, suddenly isolating himself from his loving family and refusing to leave his empty house. It is the absolute perfect narrative. By the time our flight lands back here in Boston next week, the emergency court order will already be fully processed. We will simply have the medical transport team quietly waiting at his front door. He will be safely transitioned into a secure psychiatric facility in Vermont for his own good. And we will assume total immediate legal control over the entire revocable trust. This $3.5 million house, the vast investment portfolios, and all of his liquid cash accounts will finally officially belong to us. The sheer calculated perfection of their sinister trap was genuinely breathtaking. They had actively used my profound grief over Clara's passing to paint me as a deeply unstable, reclusive old man. They had cleverly manipulated me into voluntarily skipping the safari, effectively transforming my quiet, dignified retreat into the final piece of manufactured evidence required to legally steal my fundamental human rights. If I had simply stayed home oblivious to their dark conversation, I would have woken up next week to the terrifying sight of medical orderlies forcing me out of my home and locking me away for the rest of my natural life. They were willing to legally bury me alive to accelerate their inheritance. My chest completely stopped hurting. The profound, suffocating sorrow that had heavily weighed down my tired heart since I first read Leo's text message at 5 a.m. completely evaporated into thin air. There was absolutely no trace of paternal love left inside my body. The man standing in that master bedroom was no longer my son. He was a dangerous, heavily compromised liability. He was an active, willing participant in a highly sophisticated, deeply malicious conspiracy specifically designed to completely strip away my freedom, my dignity, and my hard-earned legacy. I simply did not need to ever hear another single word from them. I silently pushed myself away from the hallway wall, ensuring that the heavy fabric of my winter coat did not brush against the wooden door frame. I placed my shoes with absolute surgical precision on the exact edges of the wooden stairs, silently reversing my path down into the dim carriage house. My breathing was incredibly slow, remarkably deep, and completely, entirely controlled. I felt a sudden, massive surge of cold, highly focused energy completely flood my veins. It was the exact same intensely familiar feeling I used to get when I stepped onto a highly chaotic, heavily delayed commercial shipping dock and realized I had to ruthlessly fire the entire management crew and actively rebuild the failing logistics chain from the absolute bare ground up. I slowly and silently slipped out the side door of the garage, feeling the cold morning wind immediately hit my face. I walked the 2 long blocks back to my parked sedan, my strides incredibly long and completely purposeful. I quickly climbed into the driver's seat and firmly gripped the heavy leather steering wheel. The time for any silent, crippling grief was entirely over. They had officially declared war. and I was going to deliver a financial and legal slaughter so profoundly devastating that their precious Vance family name would be permanently ruined. The drive through the winding historic streets of Boston was a blur of red brick and driving rain. The heavy tires of my sedan hummed a steady, monotonous rhythm against the wet asphalt, perfectly matching the cold mechanical processing of my own thoughts. I did not drive back to my empty, silent house. I drove directly into the dense, towering heart of the downtown financial district. The towering glass and steel skyscrapers loomed overhead like massive, unforgiving sentinels as I navigated the slick, crowded avenues. I pulled my vehicle into the subterranean parking garage of a sleek high-rise office building, cut the engine, and took one final, incredibly deep breath. The raw, visceral sting of absolute betrayal had completely subsided, replaced entirely by a profound, terrifying clarity. I was no longer a grieving widower, and I was no longer a forgiving father. I was a man actively fighting for his own fundamental survival. I stepped out of the elevator on the 50th floor and walked purposefully through the heavy glass doors of Thorne, Vance and Sterling, one of the most ruthless and highly respected corporate law firms in the entire New England area. The receptionist, a sharply dressed young woman who had known me for over a decade, immediately recognized the hard, unyielding expression on my face. She did not bother asking if I had a scheduled appointment. She simply nodded quickly, picked up her desk phone, and quietly pressed a single button. Within seconds, the heavy mahogany door at the far end of the plush corridor swung open. Elias Thorne stood in the doorway. Elias was a 70-year-old legal shark, a man whose tailored Italian suits barely concealed the predatory instincts of a highly aggressive courtroom brawler. He had been my personal attorney, my trusted confidant, and my closest friend for over 35 years. He was the man who had expertly drafted every single ironclad contract for my shipping business, fiercely protecting my wealth from countless corporate predators. Elias took one look at my posture, stepped aside, and silently ushered me into his expansive corner office. He closed the heavy door behind us, ensuring the locking mechanism clicked firmly into place. The room was a monument to legal intimidation, featuring floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a sweeping panoramic view of the dark, churning waters of Boston Harbor. He did not offer me a drink or ask me how my morning was going. He walked directly over to his massive oak desk, sat down in his high-backed leather chair, and fixed his piercing gray eyes directly on me. "You have that exact same look on your face that you had 20 years ago when you ruthlessly fired your entire logistics executive board," Elias said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Tell me exactly who we are legally destroying today." I sat down in the leather chair opposite him. I did not waste time with emotional preludes or long drawn-out explanations. I gave him the pure, unvarnished facts. I told him about the early morning text message from Leo canceling the safari. I told him about the 3 consecutive bank withdrawals of exactly $9,999 carefully pulled from the emergency joint checking account. And finally, I told him about my silent trip to the Beacon Hill brownstone. I repeated word for absolute word the horrifying conversation I had actively eavesdropped on between Chloe and my son. I described their calculated plan to illegally purchase a fraudulent medical diagnosis of advanced Lewy body dementia. I detailed their exact timeline to legally declare me totally incompetent and forcibly lock me away in a secure psychiatric medical facility while they safely enjoyed a luxury vacation purchased with my own black card. Elias did not interrupt me once. He sat perfectly still, his hands steepled tightly together, his expression growing darker and significantly more dangerous with every single sentence I delivered. When I finally finished, a heavy, suffocating silence filled the expansive office. Elias slowly lowered his hands and let out a long, highly controlled breath. "I warned you about this." "Marcus," he said, his tone devoid of any judgment, heavily laced instead with a cold, terrifying, professional fury. "8 years ago, when you insisted on buying that incredibly expensive Beacon Hill property in cash and placing it into a revocable living trust for Leo to actively use, I explicitly warned you. I sat in this exact same chair and I told you that putting massive, unrestricted assets into the hands of a weak young man with a highly manipulative wife was a recipe for absolute financial disaster. I told you they would eventually view your extraordinary generosity as a permanent weakness. You were absolutely right, Elias," I replied evenly, not breaking eye contact. I foolishly let my profound grief over Clara blind my rational judgment. I desperately wanted to provide him with a beautiful, stress-free life. But I am not here to discuss my past parental failures. I am here because my own son and his terrible wife are actively trying to legally bury me alive. I need to know exactly how far along they are in this process. I need to know the specific mechanics of the execution they have planned for me. Elias did not say another word. He immediately swiveled his heavy leather chair toward his multi-monitor computer setup. His fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard with practiced aggressive speed. As a highly senior partner in a massive law firm, Elias possessed specialized high-level access to the secure digital dockets of the county superior court system. He bypassed the public portals and dug directly into the restricted back-end filing networks where local attorneys digitally queue up their forthcoming legal petitions before they are officially stamped by a sitting judge. The soft, rapid clicking of his keyboard was the only sound in the tense room for several agonizing minutes. I watched his eyes rapidly scan the dense lines of legal code flashing across his bright monitors. Suddenly, his fingers stopped moving. His jaw tightened significantly, and a dark, dangerous shadow passed entirely over his face. He reached out, grabbed his mouse, and clicked a single file. He slowly turned the large monitor around so it directly faced me. The bright screen illuminated the dark room, casting a pale light over the mahogany desk. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto the stark, highly formal legal header clearly displayed at the very top of the digital document. It was an official petition for emergency medical proxy and declaration of complete incapacity. The primary petitioner listed was Leo Sterling. The targeted respondent was Marcus Sterling. Elias pointed a sharp finger at the screen, his voice tight with barely suppressed anger. They did not just talk about it, Marcus. They actually paid a highly corrupt, completely unethical lawyer to draft the entire execution order. It is fully weaponized and actively sitting in the secure digital queue. Look at the attached exhibits. They have already uploaded a preliminary medical affidavit heavily implying severe, rapidly progressing Lewy body dementia. Intentionally signed by a neurologist completely outside of your normal medical network. They have documented your recent grief-induced isolation as undeniable proof of profound mental instability. And look at the scheduled filing date. He tapped the bottom of the screen. Next Tuesday. Exactly 48 hours after their massive international flight officially lands, and they are completely out of international communication range in the deep Serengeti. I stared at the glowing document, reading the cold, deeply clinical language designed to systematically strip away my basic human rights, seize my entire financial legacy, and forcibly erase me from the civilized world. They were going to quietly submit this massive, Irreversible legal bomb to a sympathetic probate judge while they were safely drinking premium vintage wine on a private safari balcony I had personally paid for. They expected to return to Boston, step off the plane, and casually inherit my vast fortune while I wasted away in a locked, sterile room in Vermont. Elias turned the monitor back around and looked at me, his eyes burning with a fierce protective fire. They have officially loaded the gun, Marcus, and they have actively pointed it directly at your head. If we do not completely dismantle this right now, you will absolutely lose your freedom before the week is over. They think they are dealing with a helpless old man. I slowly stood up from the leather chair, buttoning my heavy wool coat. I looked out the massive window at the dark, churning waters of the harbor. I felt absolutely nothing for the boy I had raised. The betrayal was complete, absolute, and utterly unforgivable. I turned back to my old friend, my voice a cold, chilling whisper of pure destruction. They are not dealing with a helpless old man, Elias. They are dealing with the architect who built their entire world. And today, we are going to tear their miserable house down to the absolute studs. Show me exactly how we financially slaughter them. Elias leaned forward, resting his forearms heavily on the mahogany desk. The burning intensity in his eyes perfectly mirrored the cold fire surging through my veins. He offered absolutely no generic legal platitudes. Instead, he immediately shifted into the highly tactical mindset that made him the most feared trust attorney in the city. He explained that a direct emotional confrontation right now would be a massive strategic error. If I simply stormed into that Beacon Hill brownstone and angrily demanded answers, Leo and Chloe would instantly realize their sinister plot had been exposed. They would immediately contact their corrupt lawyer, scramble to hide their illicit financial trails, and potentially attempt to accelerate the guardianship petition using emergency psychiatric holds. We needed to operate with absolute total secrecy. We were going to let them pack their designer luggage. We were going to let them board that luxurious international flight tomorrow morning, utterly convinced that their devastating trap was flawlessly set. And while they were completely isolated in the middle of the African savannah, sipping expensive wine on my dime, we were going to systematically dismantle their entire financial existence. The very first step of our counteroffensive was addressing the massive Beacon Hill estate. When I originally purchased that $3.5 million historic property for Leo, I had legally structured the ownership through a revocable living trust. At the time, Leo and Chloe had been mildly annoyed by the complex legal arrangement, foolishly assuming it was just a tedious administrative hurdle. They completely failed to comprehend the profound absolute power that specific legal designation granted me. As the sole creator and primary grantor of a revocable trust, I held the absolute unquestionable authority to alter, amend, or completely dissolve the entire legal entity at any given moment. I did not need Leo's signature. I did not need Chloe's permission. I did not even have a legal obligation to inform them that the status of their primary residence was being permanently altered. The house was essentially a very expensive, highly conditional gift that I could revoke the second they proved themselves unworthy. And they had just proven themselves to be actively dangerous. Elias pulled a thick stack of legal paper from his drawer and slid a gold pen across the wooden surface. He began rapidly drafting a formal notice of trust revocation. His sharp mind easily navigated the complex terminology required to immediately sever the property from the trust. The document explicitly stated that the original trust agreement was now officially null and void. The entire $3.5 million Beacon Hill property, along with all associated physical assets and underlying equity, was immediately reverting back to my sole individual name. I picked up the heavy gold pen and stared at the crisp white paper. For a brief, Fleeting second. The faint ghost of a memory crossed my mind. I remembered holding a much younger Leo on my shoulders, proudly showing him the massive cargo ships pulling into the port. But that innocent boy was entirely gone, completely replaced by a treacherous stranger who had actively conspired to lock me in a medical prison. I gripped the pen firmly and signed my full legal name with heavy, deliberate strokes. Elias immediately took the document, placed his official notary stamp on the bottom of the page, and pressed down with a loud, final click. He quickly handed the paperwork to his senior paralegal, a stern, highly efficient woman who had silently entered the office. He explicitly instructed her to personally walk the documents down to the county recorder's office and file them before the afternoon deadline. With that single legally binding signature, Leo and Chloe were officially stripped of their most valuable asset. They no longer resided in a luxurious, multi-million-dollar family estate. They were now simply unauthorized occupants, living in a house entirely owned by the man they were actively plotting to destroy. The financial slaughter was just beginning. We immediately moved on to the second phase of our counteroffensive, the joint emergency checking account, the very same account they had maliciously used to structure those highly illegal cash withdrawals. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out my smartphone, and placed it flat on the desk between us. I opened my secure mobile banking application and quickly navigated to the specific emergency ledger. The digital screen displayed a remaining available balance of just over $600,000. It was a massive sum of liquid cash that Clara and I had painstakingly accumulated over decades of hard physical labor. It was money meant to protect our family from genuine tragedies, not finance a corrupt medical conspiracy. Elias pulled his chair closer, his eyes fixed intently on the glowing digital screen. As my official legal counsel, he needed to physically witness the entire financial transaction to ensure there were absolutely no future claims of improper asset mismanagement. I tapped the transfer icon. I selected the joint emergency account as the primary source of the funds. Then, I selected a completely private, deeply secure solo account that I had maintained entirely separate from the family trust. I carefully typed the exact numerical value into the transfer window. Every single penny. I did not leave them a single dollar for a rainy day. I did not leave them a single dime to cover their extravagant monthly utility bills or their premium automobile insurance premiums. I paused for one final second, my finger hovering directly over the bright green confirmation button. I visualized Chloe laughing in that sunlit bedroom, openly mocking my grief. I pictured the corrupt doctor signing a fraudulent medical document designed to legally erase my freedom. And I pictured Leo, my own flesh and blood, cowardly validating the entire sinister operation. I pressed the button. The digital screen instantly refreshed. The joint emergency account balance dropped from over $600,000 down to zero. The massive life-altering sum of money was instantly and legally transferred into my impenetrable solo account. Elias leaned back in his leather chair, a look of profound professional satisfaction settling over his sharp features. He softly clapped his hands together once, the sharp sound echoing in the quiet room. You have officially severed their primary financial lifeline. Marcus, he said, his voice calm and deeply measured. The house is completely yours. The liquid cash is completely yours. By the time they officially board that international flight tomorrow, they will be functioning on pure financial fumes without even realizing it. But we still have one final, incredibly critical task to complete before they fly away. We must neutralize the pending court petition before their corrupt attorney can officially file it next Tuesday. I slowly picked up my phone and slipped it back into my coat pocket. The deep, heavy burning in my chest, had been entirely replaced by an ocean of pure freezing ice. I looked directly at Elias. My jaw set with absolute unyielding determination. We are not just going to neutralize their pathetic court petition, Elias. We are going to aggressively turn it completely around and use it to legally bury them. Tell me exactly what to do. Elias's eyes narrowed. A predatory gleam flashing in the cool gray light of the office. He leaned back, steepling his fingers once more. He began to explain the standard defensive maneuvers, suggesting we immediately file an emergency counter-injunction, preemptively alerting the court to their fraudulent medical documents. He proposed dragging them through years of grueling, highly expensive litigation until they were completely bankrupt. But I slowly shook my head. A long, drawn-out legal battle in a sterile courtroom was far too merciful for what they had planned for me. I did not want them to have the luxury of time, the ability to hire defense attorneys, or the comfort of sleeping in a warm bed while we fought. I wanted a total, instantaneous financial annihilation. I wanted them to return from their luxury safari to find their entire universe fundamentally erased. We are going to sell the Beacon Hill brownstone, I stated flatly, the words dropping like heavy lead weights onto the polished desk. Not next month. Not next week. We are going to sell it right now. Before they even have the chance to order their first premium cocktail on that reserve, Elias blinked momentarily. Taken aback by the sheer aggression of the pivot, he quickly recovered his legal mind. Churning through the logistics, he reminded me that traditional real estate transactions take 30 to 60 days to properly close. They would return from their vacation long before the property officially changed hands. But I was simply not talking about a traditional, comfortable real estate transaction. I was talking about a ruthless corporate liquidation. During my 40 years as a commercial logistics executive, I had crossed paths with every conceivable type of property investor in the greater New England area. I knew exactly who to call when a massive property needed to vanish from the ledger overnight. There is a very specific, highly lucrative subculture within the real estate market dedicated entirely to corporate cash flippers. These are massive, heavily funded corporate investment groups that specialize in acquiring distressed or highly motivated properties at a steep discount. They completely bypass the traditional sluggish banking system. They buy properties sight unseen, utilizing deep reserves of liquid cash to close massive deals in a matter of days, completely skipping the extremely tedious appraisal and inspection contingencies. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out my smartphone, and scrolled past Leo's treacherous contact profile. I stopped on a specific name I had not dialed in nearly a decade: Silas Croft. Silas was a ruthless, highly efficient corporate real estate shark who ran the largest historic cash flipping syndicate on the East Coast. He and I had done several highly profitable extremely quiet deals back when I was liquidating old commercial port warehouses. Silas only cared about two things in this world: speed and massive profit margins. I pressed the call button and placed the phone on speaker, resting it directly in the center of Elias's desk. The line rang twice before a sharp, gravelly voice answered. Marcus Sterling. Silas Boomel. His tone thick with genuine surprise. I thought you officially retired and moved to a golf course. What does a retired logistics kingpin need from a guy like me on a damp Thursday afternoon? I need to liquidate a premium residential asset. Silas, I replied smoothly, my voice devoid of any casual pleasantries. And I need it done faster than you have ever closed a deal in your entire career. The casual warmth instantly vanished from Silas's voice, entirely replaced by the cold, calculating edge of a predator smelling blood in the water. Define your timeline. Marcus, What exactly are we looking at? I have a pristine, historic architectural brownstone sitting on a premium corner lot in highly exclusive Beacon Hill. I stated, my words crisp and entirely deliberate. The current market appraisal values the property at exactly $3.5 million. I hold the absolute unencumbered deed in my personal name. There are 0 liens, 0 outstanding mortgages, and absolutely no legal encumbrances. The legal title is perfectly clean. I paused, letting the immense value of the asset hang heavily in the air. I knew Silas was already mentally calculating the neighborhood comparables. I will sell you the entire estate for a flat 20% discount. I continued, dropping the massive financial bait, $2.8 million cash. But I have 2 absolute non-negotiable conditions. First, we fully close the transaction and officially record the deed transfer in exactly 3 days. No standard inspections, no lengthy appraisals, no financing delays. Pure liquid cash wired directly into my attorney's escrow account by Monday morning. I heard a low whistle through the phone speaker. A flat 20% discount on a pristine Beacon Hill mansion was an incredibly rare, deeply lucrative margin for a cash flipper. Silas simply did not hesitate. If the title is as clean as you say it is, Marcus, I can have my corporate attorneys wire the entire sum by Monday at 9 in the morning. What is the second condition? This was the crucial, profoundly devastating strike. This was the exact mechanism that would completely obliterate Leo and Chloe's comfortable reality. The property must be purchased strictly as is. Silas, I said, my voice dropping to a low Praston. Chilling register. And when I say as is, I am specifically referring to the absolute entirety of its current physical contents. Every single piece of custom imported furniture, every expensive television, every single designer dress hanging in the walk-in closets, every piece of expensive jewelry left in the drawers, and every single digital device scattered across the counters. You buy the house, and you take absolute legal ownership of everything currently existing inside those walls. I want your aggressive clean-out crews waiting in the alleyway on Tuesday morning. I want them to haul absolutely everything left inside that house directly into an industrial dumpster. You keep what you want to sell, and you physically destroy the rest. A heavy silence fell over the speakerphone. Even a hardened, ruthless liquidator like Silas was momentarily stunned by the sheer unadulterated aggression of the demand. But business was business, and the profit margin was undeniable. You are a terrifying man when you are highly motivated. Marcus, Silas finally replied, a dark chuckle vibrating through the audio connection. You have yourself a deal. Send the legal address and the title documents to my acquisition team. We will begin drafting the binding purchase agreement immediately. I firmly terminated the active call and slowly looked directly at Elias across the polished wooden desk. My highly seasoned attorney simply stared back at me with an expression of profound, deeply respectful awe. He silently acknowledged the absolute brilliance of the maneuver. The intricate financial trap was securely set in motion. We were now perfectly ready for their complete legal destruction. Elias leaned back in his heavy leather chair and offered a low whistle of genuine admiration. The sheer audacity of liquidating a multi-million-dollar estate in 72 hours to a corporate flipping syndicate was an absolute masterstroke. I thanked my old friend for his rapid legal execution, stood up, and firmly shook his hand. We had successfully initiated the complete demolition of their primary financial foundation. But the true psychological warfare was just about to begin. I walked out of the towering downtown office building and stepped back onto the wet Boston pavement. The heavy rain had finally stopped, leaving the gray city streets slick and reflective under the afternoon sky, I climbed into the familiar cabin of my sedan. Completely ignoring the damp chill seeping through my wool coat, I placed my hands on the steering wheel, taking a moment to fully process the incredibly satisfying reality of what we had just accomplished. Leo and Chloe were currently spending their afternoon packing their expensive designer luggage, entirely convinced that they had flawlessly outsmarted a grieving, helpless old man. They believed their malicious legal petition was safely secured and ready to strip away my entire existence. They were gleefully preparing to embark on a massive luxury safari that I had painstakingly organized and fully funded. They thought I was sitting at home weeping over old photographs and slowly losing my mind. Instead, I was actively dismantling the very fabric of their comfortable, unearned lives. However, simply taking the house and the emergency cash was not entirely sufficient. I wanted them to deeply touse, viscerally feel the profound consequences of their arrogance. I wanted them to experience the exact same terrifying helplessness they had so casually planned to inflict upon me. I did not want them to simply find out they were homeless and broke while standing comfortably in their local driveway. I wanted them entirely trapped. I wanted them completely isolated in the African savannah, surrounded by opulent luxury that they suddenly could not afford to touch. I reached into my pocket, retrieved my smartphone, and opened the contacts list. I bypassed my personal network and navigated directly to the saved reservation file for our upcoming Tanzanian voyage. I tapped the primary customer service number for the elite Safari concierge desk. The call connected instantly, routing me through a brief automated menu before placing me on a very short hold. A cheerful, highly professional voice answered the line, greeting me by name and enthusiastically thanking me for my premium loyalty status. The representative asked how she could assist me with my upcoming embarkation for the presidential tented suite. I kept my voice perfectly smooth and entirely calm, betraying absolutely none of the cold fury burning in my chest. I provided my secure booking reference number, my personal identification details, and the primary billing zip code to fully verify my authorized status on the account. She efficiently confirmed my identity and cheerfully asked if I needed to arrange any last-minute hot air balloon excursions or perhaps upgrade our premium dining packages. I politely declined her offers. I told her that I needed to make a highly specific, immediate administrative adjustment to the primary passenger folio. I explained that a sudden, unavoidable personal matter had unfortunately arisen, and I would absolutely not be boarding the international flight tomorrow morning. The representative offered her immediate, practiced condolences. Assuming that I wanted to completely cancel the entire reservation and initiate the standard refund protocol, she began explaining the late cancellation penalties, but I quickly and firmly interrupted her routine speech. I clarified my exact intentions. I explicitly stated that I was not canceling the physical flights or the lodge reservations. The remaining passengers listed on the primary folio, Leo Sterling, Chloe Sterling, Beatrice Vance, and Julian Vance, were absolutely still planning to board the plane and embark on the scheduled Serengeti itinerary. I wanted their physical boarding passes to remain completely active and entirely valid. The representative paused mildly, confused by the unusual request, but quickly confirmed that the secondary passengers could absolutely proceed with the vacation without my physical presence. That was exactly what I needed to hear. Then, I delivered the final devastating blow. I instructed her to immediately and permanently remove my personal black card from the Central Resort spending account. I explained that I was completely severing all financial responsibility for the remaining passengers. I demanded that my card be entirely unlinked from their individual cabin accounts, their digital folios, and any associated on-site credit lines. The The representative fell silent for a brief moment, likely reading the extensive list of premium beverage packages, luxury spa appointments, and expensive specialty dining reservations that were already linked to that specific credit card. She carefully informed me that doing so would immediately void all of those specific premium arrangements. I told her that was precisely my intention. I firmly reiterated that Leo, Clou, Beatrice, and Julian were now fully responsible for providing their own independent method of payment upon arrival at the luxury camp. If they wanted to consume premium vintage wine, access the high-speed satellite internet, or participate in any exclusive reserve excursions, they would have to physically present their own credit cards to the lodge manager. I waited patiently on the line as she typed rapidly on her keyboard, officially executing my exact commands. She read a formal disclosure statement confirming that my financial liability was officially terminated and that the remaining passengers would be presented with a zero-balance folio upon check-in. I thanked her for her highly efficient assistance and promptly ended the call. I placed the phone down on the passenger seat of my sedan. A cold, undeniable smirk finally breaking across my face. The trap was now entirely complete. The snare had been flawlessly set, and the bait was simply too magnificent for them to ever refuse. They were going to wake up tomorrow morning, load their massive, overstuffed designer suitcases into a premium rideshare vehicle, and eagerly head down to the bustling Logan International Airport. They would successfully scan their active boarding passes, walk onto that massive luxury airliner, and immediately head straight for the complimentary champagne to celebrate their perceived victory. Julian would confidently order the most expensive vintage wine available upon landing at the lodge. Chloe would loudly request a private spa treatment, and Leo would smugly hand the concierge his digital key, completely expecting my unlimited black card account to smoothly absorb the massive financial impact, the absolute humiliation they were about to experience when that card was brutally declined would be genuinely magnificent. They would be standing in the middle of a crowded luxury reserve, cut off from my wealth, forced to desperately empty their own highly depleted bank accounts just to secure a basic internet connection. They would be physically trapped on a massive savanna in the middle of Africa for 14 long, agonizing days, slowly realizing that their unlimited financial gravy train had completely derailed. And while they were desperately trying to figure out how to pay for their own extravagant bar tab, Silas Croft and his aggressive corporate demolition crew would be violently throwing their entire pretentious lifestyle into a rusted steel dumpster in Boston. I smiled. The next morning arrived with the crisp, damp chill that perfectly defined late winter in New England. I had been awake long before dawn, nursing a black coffee in my kitchen, methodically reviewing the timeline. By 8 o'clock, I was parked in an elevated viewing lot overlooking the bustling international terminal at Logan Airport. The massive, brilliant white fuselage of the commercial airliner dominated the tarmac, preparing to cast off for the long transcontinental journey. The terminal was a hive of chaotic activity. Fleets of taxis and shuttle buses constantly pulled up to the unloading zones, discharging hundreds of eager passengers. I sat comfortably in my sedan, a pair of compact field binoculars resting on the console. I did not need them yet. I knew exactly what time they would arrive. Leo was aggressively punctual when it came to securing his own pleasure, right on schedule. A premium black sport utility vehicle glided smoothly up to the designated VIP drop-off lane. The driver stepped out and quickly opened the rear doors. My heart beat with a slow mechanical rhythm as I watched Leo step onto the concrete. He was dressed in expensive resort wear, looking entirely relaxed and completely carefree. Chloe followed closely behind him, her face hidden behind oversized designer sunglasses. dramatically gesturing for the driver to handle her massive array of luggage. Then came Beatrice and Julian, bouncing out of the vehicle, wearing brightly colored safari shirts that looked profoundly ridiculous in the cold Boston wind. They stood together on the pavement, laughing loudly, completely enveloped in their unearned arrogance. They handed their bags to the eager porters, expecting my premium loyalty status to smooth every single step of their VIP embarkation process. I picked up my digital tablet from the passenger seat and opened the primary social media application. I had created an anonymous profile months ago to keep track of family updates Leo routinely forgot to share. I navigated directly to Chloe's public feed. She had just posted a fresh, highly filtered photograph of the four of them standing proudly in front of the massive terminal. The caption beneath the image read, "Embarking on our much-needed, incredibly hard-earned luxury wellness retreat. Time to leave all the stress behind and completely pamper ourselves." A champagne glass emoji punctuated the absurd statement, "Incredibly hard-earned." The sheer delusion required to type those words after financing a corrupt medical trap with stolen cash was staggering. They genuinely believed they had successfully outmaneuvered me. They firmly believed the most difficult part of their sinister plan was already behind them, completely unaware that they were actively walking directly into a flawless, inescapable financial cage. I watched through the windshield as they casually strolled through the heavy glass doors of the main terminal building. Disappearing into the VIP security queue, they would be fast-tracked directly onto the plane, bypassing the long lines of ordinary passengers. I sat in my sedan for another 2 hours, patiently watching the endless stream of aircraft take off. The massive loading ramps were eventually pulled back. The deep, powerful vibration resonated through the damp air as the plane's massive engines fired to life. I watched the colossal white vessel slowly and smoothly taxi down the runway, gaining speed before lifting elegantly into the gray sky. They were finally on their way. Within a few short hours, they would completely lose all standard terrestrial cellular service. They would be fully reliant on the reserve's exorbitant satellite internet connection, a premium service that they no longer had the financial means to seamlessly access. They were entirely isolated, perfectly suspended across the globe, completely cut off from their corrupt attorneys and their heavily leveraged reality back on solid ground. I put the heavy sedan in gear and drove away from the airport, heading straight back to the downtown financial district. Elias Thorne was already waiting for me in the executive boardroom of his law firm. Seated across from him was Silas Croft, flanked by two of his own aggressive corporate attorneys. The atmosphere in the room was strictly, coldly business. There were no pleasantries, no casual conversations about the weather. We were there to execute a highly lucrative, profoundly devastating corporate liquidation. Silas had a thick stack of finalized closing documents neatly arranged on the polished mahogany table. His legal team had thoroughly verified the completely unencumbered status of the Beacon Hill estate. They knew they were securing an incredibly valuable asset, and they were more than eager to finalize the transaction before I could possibly change my mind. I sat down at the table and picked up the heavy gold-plated pen that Elias explicitly provided for the occasion. I carefully read through the binding clauses. The language was exceptionally clear and entirely unforgiving. The sale was strictly and undeniably, as is, the buyer assumed absolute total ownership of the physical property and the complete entirety of its current contents. Silas's highly aggressive demolition crews were officially authorized to physically breach the property and commence total physical liquidation at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. I placed the tip of the pen on the thick paper and signed my legal name on the final signature line. I pushed the executed documents across the table to Silas. He reviewed the signatures, nodded sharply to his lead attorney. and smoothly pulled a secure digital authentication token from his jacket pocket. Silas rapidly keyed a numerical sequence into the token, authorizing the immediate release of the massive funds. We sat in absolute silence and waited. Less than 3 minutes later, my personal smartphone illuminated on the table. It was a highly secure, automated priority alert from my primary banking institution. I picked up the device and opened the encrypted message. The notification was incredibly brief, beautifully simple, and profoundly absolute. An incoming federal wire transfer of $2.8 million had successfully cleared and was now permanently settled into my private impenetrable solo account. The money was fully secured. The transaction was completely irreversible. Silas stood up firmly, shook my hand, and briskly walked out of the room with his legal team to immediately dispatch his property extraction crews. I stood completely alone in the silent boardroom with Elias. The massive Beacon Hill brownstone, the physical manifestation of all their arrogant pride, absolutely no longer belonged to my son. Their expensive cars, their designer wardrobes, and every single piece of antique furniture they had ever owned were about to be violently tossed into a commercial dumpster. The financial slaughter was flawlessly executed, and my treacherous son was completely and entirely trapped on another continent, now absolutely powerless to stop it. I sat in the quiet comfort of my living room, the glowing embers of the fireplace casting a warm, flickering light across the hardwood floor. A steaming cup of black coffee rested on the table beside me. The house was entirely silent, completely devoid of the suffocating grief that had plagued me just a few days prior. Thousands of miles away, completely swallowed by the vast, baking expanse of the Serengeti. My son and his treacherous wife were currently experiencing the absolute undeniable reality of their actions. The ultra-luxury safari industry operates on a very specific, entirely cashless financial model. The moment a guest steps onto the private reserve, physical currency becomes completely useless. Every single transaction, from premium dining and luxury spa treatments to satellite internet and top-tier alcohol, is exclusively processed through a digital concierge account. That account must be securely backed by a valid, active credit card. I had completely severed that crucial financial lifeline. I knew it would take a few hours for the flight to land and for them to reach the remote lodge. Right on schedule. My smartphone began to vibrate on the coffee table, because they were entirely cut off from standard cellular towers. They had to rely on the lodge's highly restricted, incredibly weak emergency satellite network to make outgoing calls. The connection was terrible, heavily laced with crackling static. But the frantic, desperate audio messages they left on my secure voicemail system were remarkably clear in their absolute panic. I took a slow sip of my coffee, leaned back in my leather armchair, and tapped the screen to play the very first recorded message. Leo's voice echoed into the quiet room. He did not sound like the smug, calculating man who had confidently signed legal documents to steal my freedom. He sounded completely terrified, his breath coming in short, rapid gasps. He frantically explained that a massive, highly embarrassing misunderstanding had just occurred at the primary luxury reception tent. Chloe had proudly marched up to the premium bar, flanked by her entire arrogant family, and loudly ordered a $700 bottle of exclusive vintage wine to properly celebrate the beginning of their opulent vacation. The lodge manager had smoothly taken her digital account number, verified it through the terminal, and promptly informed her that the transaction was entirely declined. Leo stammered through the voicemail, vividly describing the sheer, excruciating humiliation of that specific moment. Chloe had aggressively argued with the manager, causing a massive, incredibly loud scene in front of dozens of wealthy international guests, she demanded that the staff run the authorization again, arrogantly proclaiming that the account was backed by a limitless black card. The manager tried multiple times, finally escalating the issue to the resort director, who coldly informed them that the primary funding source had been explicitly and permanently revoked by the account holder. Leo practically begged me to call the concierge and fix what he assumed was a simple administrative banking error. He pleaded that Chloe's mother was completely furious and intensely embarrassed by the public spectacle. I let the first voicemail end and smoothly tapped the screen to play the second message. This recording had been left exactly 40 minutes later. The initial confusion in Leo's voice had completely dissolved, entirely replaced by a raw, unadulterated, suffocating panic. He had marched directly down to the guest services desk to purchase a premium satellite internet package so he could access his mobile banking application and quickly transfer funds to save face. The premium internet connection cost exactly $200 per day. Leo had confidently handed the director his physical debit card, the one directly tied to our joint emergency checking account, the very same account they had used to illegally bribe a corrupt medical doctor. He told me, his voice cracking with absolute desperation, that the debit card was completely declined due to severely insufficient funds. He was entirely frantic, loudly demanding to know how a secure bank account with over $600,000 in liquid cash could possibly be reading a stark, undeniable zero balance. He begged me to answer the phone. He pleaded with me to contact the financial institution and report a massive, catastrophic bank fraud. He actually had the sheer unmitigated audacity to ask me to protect the very money he had systematically planned to use for my permanent legal destruction. I listened to his pathetic, cracking voice and felt an overwhelming wave of cold, calculating satisfaction. They were finally beginning to understand the full, terrifying scope of their bleak situation. They were physically trapped inside a massive luxury reserve in the middle of Africa. They had absolutely no active credit cards, zero accessible cash, and absolutely no way to generate any liquid funds. The third and final voicemail was the most revealing. It was not Leo. It was Chloe. The thick, arrogant superiority she had displayed in the Beacon Hill brownstone was completely gone. She was practically weeping into the receiver. She sobbed about how her entire family was mercilessly turning against her. Julien, her parasitic brother, was throwing a massive explosive tantrum in the main lodge because he could not order a single drop of alcohol. He had excitedly marched up to the infinity pool to begin his 14-day binge, only to be brutally informed that his account was financially locked. Chloe cried that they had been officially barred from entering all the premium specialty dining tents on the reserve. Because they possessed absolutely no valid payment methods, they were now strictly relegated to eating basic staff rations along with the local guides. A massive downgrade from the exclusive culinary experience they expected. She wailed about the sheer indignity of having to sit in a basic dining hall just to get a plate of plain food. She vividly described the burning judgmental glares from her wealthy mother, who had completely expected a flawless, highly pampered luxury experience on my dime. Instead, her mother was currently trapped in the heat, furious that their premium reservations had been totally voided. Chloe begged me to fix the accounts, promising to apologize for whatever minor slight she had supposedly committed. She still genuinely believed this was just a petty, temporary punishment for a minor disagreement. She had absolutely no idea that while she was crying over a declined bottle of expensive wine and a ruined dinner reservation, my real estate contacts were actively finalizing the complete, total demolition of her entire life back on dry land. I slowly deleted all 3 voicemails permanently, erasing their desperate, begging voices from my secure digital server. I placed my smartphone back onto the solid wooden table and took another slow, deeply satisfying sip of my hot coffee. Let them eat the basic rations. Let them suffer the brutal, unyielding fury of her humiliated, arrogant family. Let them spend the next 14 days trapped in the scorching heat, slowly descending into complete and total financial madness. They absolutely deserved every single agonizing second of this beautiful, flawless nightmare. Their precious vacation had officially become an African prison. The following morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the heavy gray skies that had mirrored my initial grief just days prior. The crisp air felt invigorating as I drove my sedan across the city toward the affluent, historic neighborhoods of Beacon Hill. I parked my vehicle down the street from the estate that no longer belonged to my treacherous son. I walked to a coffee shop on the corner, purchased a dark roast, and strolled back toward the property. I positioned myself comfortably on the public brick sidewalk directly across the quiet, cobblestone street. The neighborhood was serene, filled with the quiet hum of distant landscaping crews. It was a picture of historic tranquility, oblivious to the corporate liquidation that was about to violently unfold. I stood there wrapping my cold hands around the warm paper cup, staring at the architectural facade of the house I had purchased with parental intentions. At exactly 7:45 in the morning, the heavy sound of diesel engines shattered the quiet neighborhood peace. Two enormous roll-off dumpsters were backed down the narrow alleyway alongside the house. The heavy steel wheels gouged deep, unceremonious tracks into the pristine cobblestone. Behind the dumpsters, 3 large box trucks pulled up to the curb. A crew of 15 burly, highly efficient men in work boots poured out of the vehicles. Silas Croft had absolutely kept his word. These were hardened property extraction specialists, accustomed to rapid corporate liquidations. They operated with a cold precision that was entirely terrifying to witness. The crew foreman, a massive man holding a heavy steel pry bar and a clipboard, marched directly up to the custom antique front door. He did not attempt to pick the expensive smart lock. He simply jammed the steel bar into the door frame and wrenched it backward, shattering the historic locking mechanism with a loud crack. The heavy wooden door swung open, exposing the pristine interior of Leo and Chloe's stolen sanctuary. The financial slaughter commenced instantly. The workers flooded into the wide, sunlit foyer like an organized army of relentless locusts. Within minutes, the massive front doors were permanently wedged open, and the physical eradication of their entire pretentious lifestyle began in earnest. 2 burly workers emerged from the front door carrying Chloe's prized, custom-ordered Italian velvet sofas. I remembered the exact day she purchased them. She had casually handed the elite interior designer my black card without a single moment of hesitation, racking up tens of thousands of dollars in a single afternoon while claiming she simply needed the living room to properly reflect her elevated social status. I watched with profound satisfaction as the workers carelessly dragged the incredibly expensive white velvet across the rough brick porch. They hoisted the sofas over the rusted steel rim and let them violently crash into the empty metal bin in the alley. The delicate imported fabric instantly tore against the sharp edges of the rusted container, completely ruining the massive investment in less than 5 seconds. The relentless parade of destruction continued without a single pause. Another group of workers began violently hurling massive black garbage bags out of the second-story master bedroom window, aiming directly for the open dumpster below. The bags were overflowing with Chloe's incredibly expensive, meticulously curated designer wardrobe. Hundreds of silk dresses, premium leather handbags, and imported European shoes cascaded down into the filthy metal bin like common household trash. She had eagerly planned exactly which luxury resort outfits she would proudly wear on the savannah, blissfully unaware that her entire material existence was currently being tossed into a garbage heap. Then came Leo's prized possessions. A worker casually walked out of the carriage house, carrying 2 heavy premium leather golf bags filled with custom-fitted, incredibly expensive titanium clubs. Leo had insisted he needed the professional-grade equipment to properly network with wealthy shipping executives. The worker grabbed his bags by their premium leather straps, swung them heavily through the air, and aggressively hurled them over the high steel wall of the dumpster. The incredibly satisfying sound of bending titanium shafts and snapping carbon fiber echoed loudly across the quiet, historic street. I took another slow, deeply rewarding sip of my hot coffee as a separate team of specialized workers arrived in a small utility van. They completely ignored the massive volume of furniture being violently thrown away and walked directly up to the front entrance. They carried heavy drills, fresh brass hardware, and thick metal strike plates. Silas Croft was officially securing his newly acquired asset. The workers aggressively stripped away the broken electronic smart locks that Chloe had previously programmed with her personal security codes. They installed heavy commercial-grade deadbolts on every single exterior door of the massive estate. The physical manifestation of their total exclusion was incredibly powerful to witness. Even if Leo and Chloe miraculously managed to escape their remote African prison and somehow secure a flight back to this specific neighborhood, they would find absolutely nothing waiting for them. Their custom digital access codes were permanently erased. Their physical keys were entirely useless. They were now completely locked out of the exact same property they had once arrogantly claimed as their undeniable birthright. For 3 solid highly chaotic hours, the aggressive extraction crew ruthlessly gutted the entire $3.5 million property. They systematically stripped away every single television, every piece of expensive modern artwork, every custom imported rug, and every single digital device left carelessly resting on the marble kitchen counters. The massive steel dumpsters quickly filled to the absolute brim with the shattered, ruined remnants of their completely unearned leases. Highly pretentious lifestyle. Not a single photograph. Not a single piece of expensive jewelry. Not a single pair of designer sunglasses was spared from the violent, unyielding corporate liquidation. Everything they owned, everything they had arrogantly purchased with my stolen wealth, was brutally treated as entirely abandoned. Worthless trash. When the massive job was finally completed, the crew foreman loudly blew a sharp whistle. The workers rapidly climbed back into their unmarked vehicles. A hydraulic diesel truck backed up to the alleyway, secured the massive steel dumpsters, and slowly hauled them away toward the municipal landfill. The quiet, affluent neighborhood slowly returned to its pristine, serene state, entirely unbothered by the absolute devastation that had just occurred on that specific premium lot. I stood on the sidewalk for several more minutes, simply staring at the completely empty, thoroughly secured house. The massive front windows, previously framed by expensive silk curtains, now revealed nothing but bare, hollow, echoing rooms. The total physical eradication of Leo and Chloe Sterling was officially complete. They had absolutely no home to return to, 0 physical possessions to their name, and completely empty bank accounts. They were currently trapped in the middle of a baking savanna, hopelessly drowning in a profound, inescapable financial nightmare of their own incredibly arrogant design. I slowly crushed the empty paper coffee cup in my right hand, turned away from the empty, soulless estate, and calmly walked back toward my waiting sedan, feeling an overwhelming, absolute sense of profound, permanent, and undeniable peace. 14 days is a remarkably brief period of time in the grand scheme of an entire human life. But when you are trapped in a remote luxury tent of your own financial ruin, 14 days can easily stretch into an absolute agonizing eternity. I did not need to physically stand at Logan Airport to know exactly how the miserable return process was unfolding. My private investigator, Robert Sanchez, had discreetly positioned himself near the main international arrivals doors, providing me with highly detailed, real-time audio updates from a secure distance. The colossal commercial airliner landed back in Boston under a heavy, overcast morning sky. But there was absolutely no joy radiating from the returning passengers I was currently tracking. While hundreds of exhausted travelers eagerly streamed down the primary corridors, my treacherous son and his parasitic in-laws were severely delayed. They were entirely haggard. Robert quietly reported that Chloe looked completely unrecognizable. Her perfectly manicured, highly curated socialite facade had completely shattered. She was wearing the exact same wrinkled designer athleisure she had worn on the outbound flight. Her face pale, her hair tied in a messy, chaotic knot. Her mother, who had proudly expected to be treated like royalty, was radiating a toxic, furious silence. She completely refused to even look at Leo. Julian, suffering from 14 solid days of enforced involuntary sobriety, was nervously pacing near the terminal exit, shivering in the damp Boston wind. They had spent the entire luxury vacation isolated in their basic accommodations, eating complimentary staff food, intensely fighting over who was ultimately responsible for the catastrophic banking error. They were entirely convinced that a massive automated fraud alert had temporarily frozen their assets. They genuinely believed that the moment they stepped off the plane and found a stable cellular signal, a quick, aggressive phone call to the bank would instantly restore their unearned wealth. They desperately pulled the absolute last remnants of their physical currency. Between the four of them, they managed to scrape together just over $60 in loose, crumpled bills. It was barely enough to secure a single standard economy taxi van for the long drive back to Beacon Hill. Robert watched from a distance as they awkwardly and aggressively shoved their massive, heavy designer suitcases into the back of the scuffed yellow vehicle. They were packed into the back seats like miserable sardines, their knees pressed tightly together, the thick, heavy tension inside the cabin completely suffocating them all. Leo, desperately trying to salvage whatever remaining shred of masculine authority he still possessed, loudly promised his furious mother-in-law that everything would be completely resolved within the hour. He loudly declared that the banking issue was a simple clerical mistake, and he fiercely vowed to drive straight to the local courthouse the very following morning. He aggressively promised to immediately file the emergency medical proxy petition, fully, legally declare his father entirely incompetent, and finally seize permanent control of the entire family fortune. He was eagerly planning my complete legal execution from the cramped back seat of a foul-smelling Lee's terribly maintained commercial taxi. The yellow van merged onto the busy interstate, carefully navigating the heavy morning traffic toward the affluent, historic neighborhood. The ride took nearly 30 minutes. Every single mile brought them closer to the ultimate, devastating reality check of their utterly miserable lives. I was comfortably seated in the luxurious first-class lounge of an international airport in Dubai, quietly listening to the live audio feed as the taxi finally turned onto their exclusive, beautifully cobblestoned residential street. The quiet, serene blocks looked exactly as they always did, right up until the taxi slowly rolled to a stop in front of the familiar premium corner lot. The sudden, deafening silence inside that taxi must have been absolutely magnificent to experience firsthand. The beautiful property they had so proudly called their own was completely transformed beyond all possible recognition. It no longer looked like a pristine, multi-million-dollar historic sanctuary. It looked like a highly aggressive, incredibly active commercial construction zone. Silas Croft had wasted absolutely no time maximizing his brand new investment, the beautifully manicured entrance, which Chloe had previously obsessed over with intense ferocity, was deeply scarred by heavy work boots and scaffolding. A massive, bright red commercial real estate sign was bolted securely to the brick wall, boldly displaying the words "Under complete renovation" in huge, undeniable white letters. The elegant custom-crafted front doors had been completely removed, entirely replaced by heavy temporary sheets of raw plywood securely fastened with thick steel chains and massive commercial padlocks. Several of the large bay windows on the lower level were heavily covered in thick plastic sheeting, actively being prepped for rapid, highly intrusive corporate remodeling. The massive house was entirely dark, completely hollow, and utterly devoid of all previous domestic life. But the true absolute horror of their newly discovered situation was waiting for them directly on the damp brick sidewalk. Robert quietly narrated the chaotic scene as Leo and Chloe slowly stumbled out of the yellow taxi, their mouths hanging wide open in sheer, unadulterated, mind-numbing shock. They stood completely pear-stanced on the public sidewalk, blankly staring at the exact spot where their municipal trash bins were normally placed on collection day. There, carelessly stacked in a massive, incredibly chaotic pile, were dozens of heavy black industrial garbage bags. The plastic bags were violently ripping at the seams, fully exposing the ruined, discarded remnants of their entire pretentious, heavily financed lifestyle. A crushed, severely bent titanium golf club violently protruded sharply from one of the overstuffed bags. A highly expensive, carefully imported designer silk dress loosely spilled out of another, completely soaked by the damp, dirty morning pavement. Silas's highly aggressive demolition crew had ruthlessly followed my exact, unrelenting instructions to the absolute letter. They had rapidly cleared the sprawling house entirely down to the bare wooden studs, violently tearing out every single material item that Leo and Chloe had ever proudly owned. And sitting directly on top of the massive pile of discarded, completely ruined designer merchandise was a large hand-painted cardboard sign hastily written in thick black permanent marker by one of the anonymous demolition workers. The rough sign simply read, "Free to take." Leo blindly dropped his expensive leather travel bag directly onto the wet sidewalk. He took 2 shaky steps toward the garbage, his mind completely incapable of processing the magnitude of the visual information in front of him. Chloe finally let out a guttural scream, a sound of pure despair that echoed down the quiet street. Her furious mother stood silently behind the idling taxi, absolutely disgusted. They finally realized their precious son-in-law was a completely broke, entirely homeless fraud who had just been systematically eradicated by the very man he had tried to destroy. While Robert quietly relayed the glorious details of that curbside meltdown through my earpiece, I was nowhere near the Boston area. I was comfortably seated in a plush leather armchair inside the highly exclusive first-class lounge at Dubai International Airport. The ambient noise of the terminal was completely muted behind thick glass windows. I was sipping a perfectly brewed espresso, watching massive commercial jetliners slowly taxi across the baking tarmac. The sheer contrast between my serene, luxurious environment and the absolute chaotic devastation unfolding on that damp historic sidewalk was incredibly satisfying. I had booked a premium flight to a quiet, sun-drenched villa in the Maldives, deciding that I truly deserved a genuine, profoundly relaxing vacation. After meticulously dismantling the treacherous lives of my only son and his incredibly arrogant wife, I took another slow, deeply appreciative sip of my coffee. Feeling the warm liquid soothe the last remaining traces of tension in my chest, my smartphone rested flat on the polished glass table next to my espresso cup. The screen remained entirely dark for several long minutes as Robert concluded his detailed surveillance report and quietly ended our secure call. He confirmed that the furious mother and brother had already ordered a separate taxi, completely abandoning their disgraced daughter and humiliated son-in-law on the side of the road. I knew exactly what was going to happen next. Leo would aggressively cycle through the standard stages of grief and absolute panic. He would furiously attempt to unlock his frozen bank applications. He would desperately try to contact the corporate real estate agency listed on that massive red sign on the brick wall. And finally, when absolutely every single avenue of escape had been brutally slammed shut in his face, he would be forced to call the one man he had so callously plotted to lock away in a sterile medical facility, right on cue. The smartphone illuminated, vibrating harshly against the smooth glass surface. The caller identification displayed Leo's name. I did not answer it immediately. I sat back in my plush chair and watched the bright screen flash, allowing the incoming call to ring 5 distinct times. I wanted him to sweat. I wanted the cold, undeniable terror of his absolute financial ruin to completely saturate his mind before he heard my voice. On the 6th ring, I calmly reached out, picked up the device, and pressed the green button. I brought the phone to my ear, remaining perfectly, intentionally silent. Dad Leo screamed into the receiver, his voice cracking with a high-pitched, unfamiliar hysteria. "Dad, what the hell is going on? Where are you? You need to fix this right now. Our house is completely locked up. There are heavy wooden boards over the front doors. Some insane construction company threw all of our clothes in a pile of garbage on the street." I could hear the chaotic sounds of passing traffic roaring in the background, mixed heavily with the sharp, shrill sounds of Chloe violently sobbing. She was audibly wailing, a continuous, breathless sound of pure, unadulterated material loss. "My bank accounts are empty," Leo continued, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "The joint emergency fund is completely wiped out. My personal debit cards are declining. The Safari concierge entirely humiliated us. They locked our accounts. Chloe's mother just left us standing on the sidewalk. You have to call the bank immediately. You have to call the police. Someone stole our identity. Someone stole the house. Dad, you have to do something right now." He was practically hyperventilating, desperately clinging to the incredibly fragile hope that this was all just a massive, catastrophic mistake. He was still trying to play the traditional role of the concerned innocent son, relying on his wealthy father to immediately swoop in and financially rescue him. I took a slow, deep breath, letting his frantic, pathetic demands hang heavily in the digital connection between us. When I finally spoke, my voice was a smooth, chillingly calm whisper of absolute unyielding authority. "I do not have Lewy body dementia, son," I stated, enunciating every single syllable with razor-sharp precision. "But I did have a profound, life-altering epiphany." The dead silence that instantly fell over the other end of the line was absolute perfection. The chaotic background noise of the street seemed to completely freeze. Even Chloe's hysterical wailing momentarily choked to a sudden terrified halt. The sheer, undeniable weight of my words slammed directly into his chest. He suddenly realized that I knew absolutely everything. I did not wait for him to formulate a pathetic, desperate lie. I methodically laid out the complete, inescapable reality of his brand new existence. I sold the house. Leo. I continued, my tone completely devoid of any parental warmth or lingering mercy. I liquidated the entire Beacon Hill property to a corporate cash buyer last week. I authorized a completely unconditional, strictly as is transaction. That means every single piece of custom furniture, every designer handbag, and those expensive golf clubs you loved so much legally belong to the demolition crew. I explicitly instructed them to treat your possessions exactly like the absolute garbage you both proved yourselves to be. Dad, please. Leo whimpered, his voice shrinking into a pathetic, broken whisper. You cannot do this to us. You gave us that house? It was ours. It was a revocable trust. I corrected him smoothly. A trust that I permanently revoked the very same day you decided to formally cancel our family trip through a cowardly text message. And those bank accounts you are currently crying about? I drained them. I legally transferred every single cent of my hard-earned cash into a highly secure solo account. You have absolutely nothing left. Leo, you are officially bankrupt, totally homeless, and entirely cut off from the massive wealth you so arrogantly believed you were fully entitled to steal. No. 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 You cannot leave us like this. Leo pleaded, the sound of genuine suffocating panic completely overtaking his words. We have nowhere to sleep tonight. We do not have money for a basic hotel. We do not even have money for food. You have to help us. We are your family. You stopped being my family the exact moment you sat in that bedroom and actively plotted to lock me away in a psychiatric prison. I replied, my voice dropping to a dangerous, freezing register. You thought you could legally declare me mentally incompetent and seize my entire fortune. I paused, listening to his terrified breathing. Chloe started screaming in the background, begging me to forgive them. I completely ignored her and delivered the final blow. By the way, Elias sent a copy of your fraudulent medical proxy petition and the corrupt neurologist's signature straight to the FBI for conspiracy to commit elder fraud. I stated calmly. Leo let out a choked, horrifying sound. You are looking at a very lengthy federal criminal indictment. I added, I strongly suggest you use whatever loose change you have left to hire a defense attorney. I ended the call, picked up my premium travel bag, and confidently walked toward my departure gate, completely ready to begin my new life. There is a natural order to the world, a silent rhythm that binds a father to his child. You spend your youth building fortresses to protect them from the storms. Standing tall like the ancient pines against the bitter winter wind, you carry them on your shoulders, pointing toward the vast horizon, promising them that the world is theirs to conquer. You teach them strength. You teach them kindness. You pour every ounce of your spirit into their foundation, hoping that when the time comes, they will stand with the same unyielding courage. But sometimes, the foundation cracks. Sometimes, the child you raised looks at the fortress you built and decides the only way to claim it is to lock you in the dungeon. When love is twisted into greed, when blood is weaponized for profit, you must realize that a father's true strength is not just in what he builds, but in his absolute willingness to tear it all down. The legacy we leave is not measured in gold or stone. It is measured in the quiet dignity of walking away from those who tried to break us, and the enduring power of the man who refused to fall. I am a father who built an empire, and I am the man who left it in ashes.